Spurs sit 11th in the league and take on probably one of the most informed forwards in the league this season in Alexander Isak and Newcastle. You are obviously buzzing with this because Spurs are all over the shop. Their last result was 2-2 against Wolves. Forest, before that, they lost 1-0. Liverpool, before that, lost 6-3. Yeah, prior to that, they beat United and Southampton. What's going on?
The Spurs thing is becoming quite tiresome, isn't it? Because
Is it for you, though? Is it?
it is for me because people are still trying to defend Ange Postecoglou's approach, even though it clearly doesn't work. I accept that he's got a load of defensive issues, and that is making his life a lot harder. But surely a top manager would recognize that and adapt and adjust. We're not at the beginning of Ange Postecoglou's tenure anymore. We're not in a situation where he's trying to get that idea across and therefore he has to stick to his guns. A bit like Ruben Amorim is. He's much further down the line. And so he should be able to change it, tweak it, adjust it without it being a major problem in terms of Spurs' development overall. I look at the back four. He hasn't got the players fit. He hasn't got the players available, but he's also rushed people back. He's rushed centre backs back and literally sat there and watched their hamstrings pop one by one and just pushes them to the limit that they just can't hit. And that's because he's desperate. Well, how about you fix the team's defensive deficiencies by adjusting your shape, adjusting your system? You can't tell me that Spurs don't have the quality within the squad to play in a slightly different way. They can. I promise you, if Antonio Conte was in charge, they might not be thrilling. They might not be, entertaining everybody. The Tottenham Hotspur Stadium might not be the place to go when you want to see goals like it is now.
Yeah, yeah.
But they'd be picking up results. I'm almost certain of that. I don't know what you think. Like, are you more on the defensive of Postecoglou? Because I think, on top of all of that, he just talks too much.
I've heard you say that a few times about him, to be fair. I've always been someone who I love football because I want to see variations of styles. So, like, where you say Conte, like, a lot of people couldn't stand Conte at Spurs, but I was saying, like, it's a different style in the league. Like, we all sat and watched Spurs against Man City where they won 1-0 under Conte and 1-0 under Mourinho. But we've equally sat and watched Spurs lose 6-3 to Liverpool and beat United 4-3 and gone, they're really entertaining. For me, I think Spurs have always been, as far as my memory is a team that, like, you sit and watch and go, wow, it's going to be a good game of football. I've never sat and watched Spurs and gone, they're going to finish fourth. And so, therefore, I almost go, like, Ange is exactly what Spurs as a football club are, but they want more. I know that's music to your ears. But then I also look at this situation and I go, I think his midfield, yeah, he could maybe be more pragmatic for sure. But then I still don't think they would get more points. I think they'd still leak goals, and then I'd also think they'd lack goals. So where I don't know if I defend Ange, I think I just try and reason with the fact that Spurs are just the way Spurs are. Like this game could easily be 4-1 to Spurs, and tomorrow we'll be talking about how Ange is a genius. My problem is they lose as many games. Actually, factually speaking, they've lost more games than they've won. That now is a problem. But you're at home against Newcastle. There's no way he can play a back five in this game.
No, I'm not even necessarily saying he needs to play with a back five, but like he's got this tendency to play Bentancur at the base, who I think on a technical level can dictate the play and is very good at that. But then he likes to play, for instance, and he's done this multiple times this season, Kulusevski and Maddison as the rest of the midfield trio. That to me is too forward thinking. You need a bit more balance in there because what you're doing is you're leaving Rodrigo Bentancur to sit there and try and screen a defense that in its own right isn't good enough. And that's because of injuries, that's because of the problems that they've got. But how can you not see that? How can you not see that the balance is off in the team? And for someone who talks as much as Ange Postecoglou does in the media, if he did set up a little bit more pragmatically, why couldn't he come out and say, look, because he keeps talking about the players that are missing, he keeps talking about the injuries. Why can't you say, look, this isn't the way that we want to play in an ideal world, but we're having to adapt, we're having to adjust because of the absences that we have. Instead, he continues to say, I'm not going to change, I'm not going to change. I always win things in my second year, blah, blah, blah. You're not winning anything playing like that.
Here's a quick question then. Has he now gone too far with what he said that now he can't actually go back?
Yeah.
So if tomorrow he says we're playing more pragmatic, everyone hammers him.
But that's the problem with talking too much. Because if you didn't double down so much on your style and didn't keep refusing questions around it and, talking down to people when they suggest that maybe it's the time to sort of change and adjust, then you wouldn't be in this position where maybe your pride is preventing you from adjusting the team in the way that it needs to be adjusted to try and get
Yeah.
results.
Yeah, I think he's got himself a situation now where I don't think he can go back. And now that he's in this situation, he probably didn't plan for being here where he's got to play Foster, Pedro Porro, Archie Gray, Dragushin, and Jed Spence. Like, respectfully to those guys, Archie Gray's not a centre back.
Agreed.
Pedro Porro's playing on he's knackered. He's played too much football. Jed Spence wasn't touching the team, and now he's playing left back when he's a right back. And Dragushin is practically a new signing, and you would have seen him in Italy. He's not a high line defender. That part I will agree with. I think you've got to be able to shift your line back by 10 yards at least. And if you're not willing to do that, then you end up in this situation where you take on Newcastle and Anthony Gordon and Alexander Isak and Jacob Murphy are licking their lips, because that midfield battle actually will be interesting. But then if you can just keep throwing direct balls into channels and over the top of this defence, which they will, Newcastle will get a lot of joy. Alexander Isak, Arsenal fans tweet about him a lot. Why?
Everybody talks about what a perfect signing he would be for Arsenal, and I think that frustrates Newcastle United supporters because there's been no indication that as a football club they're in a situation where they need to let him go. I do feel for Newcastle United, although there's been an upturn recently, and Eddie Howe's doing a great job. Generally, I do feel there will come a point where the likes of Isak, Guimaraes start to look at the situation and say, we're too good to not be playing in the Champions League. And once a player's head's turned, that's half the battle. I don't think we're at that stage yet with Isak or Guimaraes, but Isak is constantly linked with a move away. It's going to take big money. The way he's playing, the way he's performing, it's his style as well. I think that's why a lot of sort of rival fans really sort of gravitate towards him, because he is a throwback, isn't it? He's not a system centre forward. He's a centre forward that goes and does what he wants. He runs right, he runs left, he works the channels. He's got that bit of flair and trickery about him as well. I'd love him to come to Arsenal, but it's not going to happen, I don't think, unless Arsenal break the bank.
Yeah, I mean, he's been unbelievable this season. I think, to be fair, a little bit of recency bias there. He's been unbelievable for the last 2 months. He was a little bit quiet at the start of the season. But I think he thrives in a team that's attacking. And Eddie Howe's had this problem before, and kudos to him, by the way. He's turned this ship around, where they've been too pragmatic, and so their attacking players look quite blunt. Now that they're playing more free-flowing, suddenly you're looking at Isak and going, he's everywhere all the time. And I didn't compare him, but I said his style was similar to like a young Thierry Henry. Like, he demands the ball, he wants to take players on, and therefore I think he would be made for Arsenal, because I think Arsenal need that sort of player who can just go, we need to win a game, give it to me, I'll go and win as a game. Score predictions for this one. It's such a good game, to be fair, when you think back at like the previous fixtures. It was 2-1 the last time they met. I remember the Newcastle 6-1, if you remember. I think that was Hugo Lloris's last ever football match. I'm sure he's still playing. And then Spurs have won a game in between there, 4-1. But Newcastle do pretty well in this fixture.
Yeah, they do. They do. And just back to the Ange Eddie Howe point. Eddie Howe is an example of a manager at a club where there is similar expectations. Try and challenge for top 6, top 4. And I think that he has shown that he needs to be adaptable to help Newcastle when they go through different periods. Right now, he's been a bit more open and they're going and attacking teams, but there are points where he battens down the hatches and says, no, actually, we need to play this way. That's what Ange needs to do. But he needs to recognise that he doesn't have a top tier squad that allows him every week to go out and play in that front-footed way, and that he needs to adjust. Eddie Howe's the example. That's what he should be looking at to keep them at the level that they need to be.
Do you think, though, because Spurs are so talked about as a football club compared to Newcastle, respectfully, that Spurs can't get away with that the way Newcastle can?
Maybe, but Spurs are talked about more, I would say, because they've been in the Champions League in recent seasons. And that shows you that even with Daniel Levy, who everybody says is the root cause of all Tottenham's problems, and I agree with that, by the way. I'm not saying that he's innocent, but I think that Conte showed it, Pochettino showed it, that this team on Levy budgets, if you like, it can be in the Champions League. And so now Ange is struggling because he's expected to mirror that. And Newcastle are a club that have been there or thereabouts in recent seasons. That's an example. You've got to be adaptable, and Spurs are not. And so I don't think Spurs will adapt. I think Newcastle will pick them off. I think their forwards are too good. I fancy Newcastle to go and win at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium.
I think... I don't think Newcastle will win away from home, although they've scored a lot of goals recently. I'll go 2-2. I think it'll be an exciting game. It always is. Spurs will play open, expansive. I think Newcastle will do the same. But I just can't pick a winner in this one.